Be strong.
The system displays two notifications. Do you want to register for the corresponding lecture? If you register for the corresponding lecture, you will receive the Divine Power S. Learn. Do you want to register for the corresponding lecture? If you register for the corresponding lecture, if you preach accordingly, you will receive the celestial body, the empty path, and the learning. SeoJoon smiled until his eyes narrowed. If I had 2 billion after deducting 500 million to buy free pass, I would have 1 billion and 500 left. The lectures that my mentor introduced to me cost 2 billion and 2 billion 5, respectively. Then I can listen to those lectures faster than I think. Of course I must first be the winner of this event. SeoJoon smiled, imagining that the three most elite people were targeting him, thinking, actually, I am not worried about the three people Kim Kang-chul, Jin Dong-min, Lee Do-yoon, I absolutely am not. I don't lose to those three people. SeoJoon calmed down, but there was only one person left, only one person who was difficult at this event. The referee suddenly said, "What is this?" Student Lee Min-yul threw away the sword in his hand and took out his bow and arrow. SeoJoon thought thoughtfully, sometimes, there are people who also use auxiliary weapons, but I've never seen anyone use more than 3 types of weapons. Normally people only focus on using a single weapon. Especially to improve fighting power thanks to taming, but when I counted it, it seemed like he had more than 8 different types of weapons. Could it be that he could use all of them? Min-yul pulled out his bow and arrow and shot, surprising his opponent. He used his sword to block Min-yul's arrows, thinking, what at first I thought his main weapon was a sword, but actually his main weapon was a bow and arrow. He moved in a Z shape in front of Min-yul. He raised his sword and said, "How can you trick me with just that?" Min-yul threw his bow and arrow onto the ring. He smiled triumphantly. Min-yul blocked his opponent's attack with 2 swords, surprising him again. Min-yul blocked and knocked the opponent several meters away. SeoJoon sat in the waiting room, watching Min-yul's match. He thought, Lee Min-yul, his fighting style is very rough, not a methodical fighting style like Lee Do-yoon, Kim Kang-chul, Jin Dong-min, which is a free and liberal attack style that is not constrained by anything. People who are not taught to become hunters in a formal way will all have their own very different fighting style. Me too, his fighting style is so similar to mine. SeoJoon doubted that he was also a student at the Ultimate Academy. SeoJoon mused, we have many students everywhere. The Ultimate Academy has 4 transcenders, is where there are 4 transcenders, is where the most students become transcenders. There are people on Earth, but there are also people who are not, but in the end all 4 of them can become people of great status. Now that I think about it, those words make sense because at the Ultimate Academy, everyone is educated. Through videos, instructors have absolutely no idea who the people who watch their videos to learn are. The referee announced the winner, Lee Min-yul. Min-yul smiled, hee I won. SeoJoon was still thinking in the waiting room. Of course, it could not be true, but there were still many suspicious things. MC said, he was indeed the 2nd place in the mock exam, just now was an overwhelming match in every aspect. Well then the final match, you must have been waiting for a long time, right? Finally, it's the player we've been waiting for, and here's the next match, the demon's disciple, who has outstanding talent. In the future she will be one of the brightest magicians of Korea, Lee Do-yoon of Ale Academy, and this is her opponent, a student who is considered the supernova of this era, who achieved a perfect score in the simulation test at the Exam Hunter Academy's test, an unprecedented record, Dream Academy student, Kim SeoJoon, let's shout. Lee Do-yoon is a genius. It's not an exaggeration, but calling her a genius is probably not enough. Lee Do-yoon is one of the 5 strongest people at Ale Academy, one of the top 3 academies in Korea. Her talent is recognized. Accepted by Jong Jimin, a genius magician and magic scholar who is next in line to take on the position of demon. There are no impossible things in Lee Do-yoon's life. Lee Do-yoon held a weapon in her hand, a series of fire circles appeared around her. In Kim SeoJoon's thoughts, he looked at her and thought to himself, in the Hunter Academy's mock exam, it was only because of the disadvantages of being a magician that Lee Do-yoon's rank was not high. If it were an exam, try the Ale Academy or the exam to become a professional hunter, things will definitely be different, I think. While he was engrossed in thinking, Lee Do-yoon launched those fire circles at him. At this moment, the smile on Lee Do-yoon's lips suddenly disappeared. It seemed she had seen something quite confusing. The next second, she was extremely shocked, her eyes widened and her mouth opened in surprise. Kim SeoJoon only needed one hand to defeat her attack, his face looked as calm as possible. Those flames were gradually dispersed and gradually disappeared. Even Kim SeoJoon couldn't understand what was going on. He scratched his head in confusion and asked, what's going on? And Kim SeoJoon was shocked by him. Her whole body trembled, then she widened her eyes and shouted, "No, that's impossible." In the stands witnessing the scene just now, everyone cheered uncontrollably. In the middle of the large arena, Lee Dan stared intently at Kim SeoJoon, wondering, could it be impossible, cutting off the magic? She was somewhat uneasy, her face darkened, telling herself, one of those two things destroyed magic. Magicians with overwhelming mana can destroy the magic of other magicians, but that magician must completely understand the operating principles of that magic and choose the right time to defeat the magic. But he is not a magician, there is no way he can understand magic. But even if he understood, he wouldn't be able to choose the right moment to defeat the magic. Kim SeoJoon held the weapon in his hand, his face thoughtful. He was curious about what it would be like if he faced magic, so he tried swinging it, and sure enough, he could defeat other magic. After thinking about it, he rubbed his head in confusion. As expected, it was a weapon in Longinus, so it would have some special effect. What exactly was this effect, while Kim SeoJoon was immersed in his thoughts? As for me, Lee Dan called out, hey. Kim SeoJoon thought, if he had to compare it with auxiliary weapons that cost 1.5 billion yen, he was thinking when suddenly his train of thought was interrupted. His eyes focused on the scene in front. A large amount of magic was gathering around Lee Dan. She used it to create thousands of fire arrows, shooting straight towards him. Lee Dan looked serious, gritted his teeth and controlled the flow of magic in his hand. Just a second later, all of them rushed straight towards Kim SeoJoon's place. His face was still filled with bewilderment and innocence before this situation. Then, with just a few sword strokes, Kim SeoJoon was able to cut away all of Lee Dan's magical attacks. This made her extremely frustrated. Her face was full of discomfort as she tried her best to release power. Everyone in the stands was extremely surprised, talking, "Oh my god, it hit them all." The two of them, one throwing moves, one blocking, kept fighting. The audience kept cheering, shouting, fighting. Suddenly, Kim SeoJoon closed his eyes and tilted his head to the side. Just a second later, Lee Dan attacked straight towards the place where he had just fallen, and Kim SeoJoon was able to dodge skillfully, which made her surprised and amazed. The weapon in her hand suddenly fell to the ground. With a dazed, lifeless expression, Lee Dan sat down on the ground. Looking at Kim SeoJoon standing in front of her, his image in her eyes suddenly faded away. Lee Dan thought helplessly and despairingly, she couldn't win, she absolutely couldn't win. Lee Dan's face was full of bewilderment, talking to herself, when, at this moment, the thought suddenly appeared in her mind that he was. However, before her thoughts finished, Kim SeoJoon stood in front of her, pointing a weapon at her opponent. Face with Lee Dan. Kim SeoJoon smiled happily and asked, "I won, right?" This situation made Lee Dan extremely confused. She opened her eyes wide in surprise and exclaimed, "Fuck." She stammered and said, "Monster," under the sight of Lee Dan sitting on the ground with Kim SeoJoon pointing a weapon at him. The referee announced that the winner, was Kim SeoJoon of the Dream Academy. The strong clashing sound of two weapons began to resound. The match commentator spoke up. Next was the battle between Lee Min-yul and Jin Dong-min. The result of the ongoing match was beyond everyone's expectations. It was truly a fierce battle. Below the ring, there were two people arguing, attacking each other at close range. The sounds from weapons kept ringing continuously. Jin Dong-min tried to use his weapon to hold off the attack from his opponent, feeling annoyed and frustrated, thinking to himself, "What a battle, no matter how you look at it, it doesn't look the same, you're clearly ahead." Lee Min-yul was also trying his best, gritting his teeth to attack. Suddenly, Lee Min-yul took out a small sharp weapon from the side of his pants, making Jin Dong-min a bit surprised. The next second, Lee Min-yul launched that weapon straight at Jin Dong-min's body, causing him to back away to avoid the attack. Jin Dong-min looked annoyed, pressed his feet to the ground to create friction and then stood firmly. Before he could regain his composure, Lee Min-yul suddenly appeared right above his head, smiling happily, preparing to attack. Jin Dong-min still didn't know that, still calmly looking at his injured arm, bewildered. Mong asked. Suddenly he pulled something out of his sleeve. Lee Min-yul did not answer, just enjoyed using his weapon to attack. On the contrary, Jin Dong-min kept falling into a state of blocking attacks, which made him extremely angry, saying, "It's just talent." Suddenly, Lee Min-yul took out a clutch, stood in front of Jin Dong-min and smiled happily. "Hi, look at the next one." Jin Dong-min was extremely confused, thinking insecurely, unable to grasp what he would do next. "What?" Lee Min-yul kept changing, taking one weapon and another. His expression was full of excitement, without any tension, as if this battle was just a game, which made Jin Dongmin extremely scared, thinking insecurely, if this continues, he will be swept away by its rhythm. Suddenly, Lee Minyul was about to move forward to attack Jin Dongmin. Jin Dongmin also felt that and immediately backed away. However, it had no effect at all. He was still hit in the stomach by Lee Minyul painfully. Jin Dongmin cried out loudly. Immediately after that, he let go of the two weapons in his hands, leaned on his hands and fell to the ground, while Lee Minyul remained standing, holding the stick in his hand. Everyone cheered non-stop. The host also announced that the winner was Lee Minyul. He heard that and laughed happily, only Jin Dongmin still couldn't believe what was happening. His face was full of bewilderment and dismay. He gritted his teeth and refused to give in. Immediately after that, he raised his face to the sky, angrily shouted, This is against the law. Where did this type of fighting come from?" Then Jin Dongmin angrily spoke up to object to the result. "I don't accept it, this result is invalid." Everyone in the stand saw that and couldn't help but talk and gossip. If that was considered a strategy, it wouldn't be against the law, but fighting like that is just weird. How can it be, in real life? In a war, you just have to win and no one cares about anything else. Anyway, it's a bit, if I were Jin Dongmin, I'd be mad. Yeah, it's really like that, I understand. Kim SeoJoon sat inside the room watching the match from the TV, seeing Jin Dongmin constantly shouting, Hey, this doesn't count. If that guy didn't do those despicable tricks then Kim SeoJoon saw that attitude of him, calmly thinking, he had already lost anyway. If Lee Minyul hadn't used the method of constantly changing weapons to fight Jin Dongmin, the result would still be the same. While thinking, Kim SeoJoon's face was strangely serious. Kim Kang-chul was equally frustrated. His face turned pale. He spoke, Damn, now I understand why the Church of Justice did that. Kim Kang-chul remembered the images of Kim SeoJoon and Lee Minyul and thought, not only Kim SeoJoon, but the purpose of the Church of Justice is that Kim SeoJoon and Lee Minyul must keep an eye on these two people. Kim Kang-chul does not. No need to do anything, just follow Kim SeoJoon's every move. Thinking of this, Kim Kang-chul was filled with doubts and questions. Did he really need to do anything? Then I thought, the ultimate goal of the Justice Church is to pass this mock exam to let Lee Minyul and Kim SeoJoon fight each other. I don't need to get involved anymore. After all, the event is different. Maybe this time it was successful. Could it be that Lee Minyul is a member of the Church of Justice? Yes, if not then no matter how great his talent is, he still cannot study and fight on his own. Defeat students from top schools. Outside the arena, the host announced that this event had reached its final moments. The following is a match that no one wants to miss. The person who possesses force as strong as iron and steel, the Pride Hunter Academy mode. Someone slowly walked up the stairs. The host shouted loudly, Kim Kang-chul, of the Hunter Academy, Kim Kang-chul. Hearing the cheers outside the arena, I thought to myself, I just need to stand and watch. The sound continued to resound, and his worthy opponent, the one with overwhelming attacks, the one who blew away everything that stood in his way, no matter what the host said, Kim Kang-chul just focused on staring at the person standing in front of him, thinking, from the very beginning, he used himself as his background. Kim SeoJoon of Dream Academy, under the introduction of the host, the discomfort in Kim Kang-chul's heart rose even more. Kim Kang-chul gritted his teeth in anger, thinking, Justice Church, I definitely won't so that they can be satisfied. Outside the arena, the host announced that this event had reached its final moments. The following is a match that no one wants to miss. The person who possesses force as strong as iron and steel, the Pride Hunter Academy mode. Someone slowly walked up the stairs. The host shouted loudly, Kim Kang-chul, of the Hunter Academy, Kim Kang-chul. Hearing the cheers outside the arena, I thought to myself, I just need to stand and watch. The sound continued to resound, and his worthy opponent, the one with overwhelming attacks, the one who blew away everything that stood in his way, no matter what the host said, Kim Kang-chul just focused on staring at the person standing in front of him, thinking, it turned out that from the beginning, he intended to use himself as the background for Kim Kang-chul. Kim SeoJoon of Dream Academy, under the introduction of the host, the discomfort in Kim Kang-chul's heart rose even more. Kim Kang-chul gritted his teeth in anger, thinking, Justice Church, I will not do this. According to your opinion. Kim Kang-chul held his weapon and fiercely attacked. Kim SeoJoon was also not the average person, mentally preparing to fight back. His face became extremely serious. The two people's weapons began to clash against each other. A large circle of power surrounded the two of them, and the ground where they stood was also completely cracked, creating a large hole. Immediately after that, Kim Kang-chul used his sword to pin the ground to keep his speed and backed away. Kim SeoJoon was no exception, placing his hands on the ground to support himself, then immediately retreated. The cheers grew louder and louder, the smoke and dust from the battle just spread around the arena. In the middle of the arena, a large hole appeared by them, both of them retreated. The two stood to recover and rest but did not forget to look closely at each other. Kim Kang-gil's eyes were cold, serious, analytical. His weapon didn't look like he had any sword energy at all but could block all of his sword energy. That's not right, it wasn't just blocking the sword energy. It's like my sword energy has no effect on him at all. That weapon looks like just an ordinary iron bar, but that's not really the case. Thanks to that weapon, he took the test this time. He just had such a high achievement, thinking as he remembered the images of Kim SeoJoon competing. Then, he jumped up quickly. In just a moment, Kim Kang-gil approached Kim SeoJoon, holding a weapon to attack him with a serious face, burning with fighting spirit. He thought, I just need to be careful with his weapons. Because the strength between the two sides was not much different, Kim Kang-gil's attack was blocked by Kim SeoJoon. Kim Kang-gil attacked while smiling triumphantly, thinking, I will be the winner, while Kim SeoJoon blocked the attack with a cold, emotionless expression. Both people in the arena were fighting very fiercely. Kim Kang-gil was constantly making fast, strong and decisive attacks. The match commentator couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah!" Kim Kang-gil kept pressing, causing Kim SeoJoon to have no chance to counterattack. Even though he used a great sword, Kim Kang-gil could still continuously attack at an extremely fast speed. His power was truly terrible. It was indeed Kim Kang-gil. His strength was truly remarkable. Formidable. Kim SeoJoon used his weapon to block those consecutive attacks, thinking to himself, Kim Kang-gil has the power to overwhelm all other students he has ever faced. Suddenly, Kim Kang-gil moved and fought in a different way, making him feel startled. Immediately after that, a powerful blow fell, causing the entire ground to crack. However, Kim SeoJoon was still able to avoid it, and the cheers of the audience grew louder and louder. Kim SeoJoon looked intently down at the ring, thinking, sure enough. Kim Kang-gil was using all his strength to attack. Lightning power radiated around the sword, rocks were smashed by him, flying everywhere. His eyes seemed to be out of control. Just focus on attacking the enemy in front of you. Kim SeoJoon looked at him with some admiration. The person ranked in the top 3 of the Hunter Academy was not just a name. Immediately after that, he easily landed on the ground. Looking at the person standing in front of him, Kim SeoJoon said to himself, if so. Suddenly, as if seeing something new, Kim Kang-gil's eyes and expression stiffened, both surprised and feeling uneasy. Kim SeoJoon's eyes suddenly became more serious and colder. It seemed like they were shining with a strange blue light. Kim SeoJoon decided that she had to go all out. Seeing the strange power surrounding him, along with that unusual attitude, Kim Kang-gil couldn't help but feel both confused and surprised. Kim Kang-gil worriedly thought about what was going on. Kim SeoJoon slowly walked forward. Just the next second, he quickly approached Kim Kang-gil's body and used his weapon to attack him. Kim Kang-gil was startled and panicked to block the attack. Both of them kept looking at each other. Right after that, Kim Kang-gil knocked Kim SeoJoon's weapon away. Kim SeoJoon was still in a fighting stance, his eyes focused intently on his opponent, extremely focused. On the contrary, Kim Kang-gil was somewhat scared, uneasy, full of doubts. Suddenly, his aura completely changed. If just now his aura was like a calm wave, now his aura was as intense as an erupting volcano. Thinking about it, Kim Kang-gil immediately held his weapon and backed away, his face also drenched in sweat. The host looked at the fierce battle going on and commented, I don't know what happened, but Kim Kang-gil, who from the beginning had always pressed his opponent, was now starting to be pushed back. Under the arena, Kim SeoJoon was constantly attacking him with fast, strong, consecutive attacks. The host continued, after being pushed back, Kim Kang-gil had to endure fierce pursuit from Kim SeoJoon. The two people's weapons kept colliding with each other. Kim Kang-gil was blocking and thinking, so fast, so strong and intense, it was impossible to express his power in just a few simple sentences. The two of them continued to fight non-stop. The cuts from their swords were so fast that they could not be seen with the naked eye, Kim Kang-gil thought, compared to his advanced swordsmanship and mana training. Hunter Academy, it's simply a weapon twist, but... While thinking, Kim SeoJoon suddenly held her weapon and shot it straight towards his face, making him bewildered and surprised. A loud explosion occurred, resounding throughout the arena, dust flew everywhere, and the cheers became increasingly louder. Kim Kang-gil had difficulty holding his sword to defend, large holes in the ground also came from his sword. Kim Kang-gil was full of fatigue, panting, sweating profusely. Kim SeoJoon's recent attack made him extremely suspicious. How could he swing that weapon so gently? After thinking about it, he immediately raised his head to look at the male lead standing in front of him, calmly without a drop of sweat on his whole body, his face unusually calm and leisurely. The more Kim Kang-gil looked, the more he discovered that the problem wasn't just that weapon, because Kim SeoJoon wouldn't have used sword energy in the first place, if he had used sword energy at all. Thinking of this, his mind suddenly turned dark, his whole body seemed to be in a trance, his eyes clearly showing insecurity and fear. Kim Kang-gil exclaimed, "No, no way," just like that. As soon as he looked at Kim SeoJoon, he thought of a scene in the past. There was a girl with long hair and bangs standing in front of him, coldly asking, "Is that all? Did you use all your strength?" Kim Kang-gil could only kneel right at that girl's feet. His sword was broken in half. The girl's words made him stunned, both helpless and indignant. With just that kind of ability he could being in the top 3 of our academy. According to Kim Kang-gil's thoughts when recalling the past, back then, how could I forget, the nightmare when I first met Lee Haejin, his hands. Kim Kang-gil suddenly trembled under Lee Haejin's cold, contemptuous words and eyes. I didn't expect much, but, the more I thought about it, the worse Kim Kang-gil's mood became. Then he shouted loudly, feeling desperate at that time, "No way, you can't do that." His attitude suddenly changed. The next second, Kim Kang-gil firmly held his sword in his hand, using all his lightning power. Thinking back to the images of people who once looked down on him, he said loudly, "You and that person, how dare you look down on me, I am Kim Kang-chul." Saying that, a powerful stream of power surrounded him, and even the space in the air gradually changed. The sky now turned black, more and more thunder broke out, all of that power focused on Kim Kang-gil's sword one after another. However, the strange thing is that under this situation, Kim SeoJoon's expression is still extremely calm and indifferent. Kim Kang-gil held the sword, tried his best to attack, his eyes seemed to flash, while shouting loudly to show his majesty, he died. Kim SeoJoon also used the power of his sword, ready to block that attack. A fierce scene happened, the sound of impact, the breaking of the sword, the fragments flying everywhere, making the audience in the stands gasp in surprise. In the end, Kim Kang-gil's sword fell, broken and no longer had any shape. Kim Kang-gil also suddenly knelt to the ground. Immediately afterwards, he lay down on the arena floor, with no strength left to resist. Kim SeoJoon was still strong, leisurely standing up straight, his face full of calm. Cheers rang out continuously. Looking at the current situation below the field, when Kim Kang-gil was no longer able to fight and looked pale, the referee announced that the winner was Kim SeoJoon. Hearing that, the male lead suddenly sighed. The cheers became more and more loud. The host said that the person who advanced to the final round was Kim Kang-chul. Lee Min-yul sat watching the match through the TV screen, couldn't help but smile happily and excitedly. Everyone in the stands was constantly cheering, talking and talking. "Hey, see, wow, luckily I came to see it in person. Is this real? To be honest, I thought Kim SeoJoon was someone from the organizer installed it. But wow, even that weapon is awesome. Who will fight Kim SeoJoon in the final? Have you been sleeping all this time?" Of course it's Lee Min-yul then. Kim Kang-gil, Lee Da-eun, and Jin Dong-min were all eliminated, so why is there anyone else? The cheers rang out non-stop. The host also began to speak. "We have kept you waiting for a long time. Finally what we have been waiting for, the final match is here. Guess who will be? Is the overall winner." Immediately following is the confrontation between two Novas who have surpassed the elite students of Down Academy, Hunter Academy, and Ale Academy. Lee Min-yul smiled and said, "I really wanted to play against you, but I didn't expect that we would face each other in the finals. You must be very curious about me." Kim SeoJoon heard him say that. His face suddenly became unusually serious. He asked. He said he had never learned martial arts privately from anyone. Lee Min-yul replied, "Yes." However, his teacher was also here. Hearing Kim SeoJoon say that, Lee Min-yul did not deny it. He scratched his head, his face full of boredom, and replied, "That's true, but my teacher doesn't know me." "Is his student?" Kim SeoJoon continued, "Do I know the teacher you're talking about?" Hearing this sentence, Lee Min-yul's hand suddenly stopped. Then he hesitantly spoke up, "That's it." Lee Min-yul showed an annoyed, frustrated look, his eyes flashing, asking, "Why are you curious about that?" Kim SeoJoon calmly shrugged and replied, "Maybe I know that person." This made Lee Min-yul extremely surprised. Surprised? What, you know our teacher? Lying. The male lead smiled happily, did not respond to his words, but just thought to himself that it would be better to just directly say that it was the Ultimate Academy. He looked at Lee Min-yul standing in front of him, while pondering his own thoughts. No, maybe not. If Lee Min-yul was not a visiting student of the Ultimate Academy, then just say it's okay to misunderstand. But if he, like me, was also a visiting lecturer at the Ultimate Academy, this would completely change. Even if they were both visiting students at the Ultimate Academy, it would still be the same. Doesn't mean he's on the same side as me, on the contrary, I should consider him a competitor. Now I can't predict how Lee Min-yul will react, so I can't be too hasty, let's give it a try. How about a viewing? The host suddenly spoke up, I guess there's no need to introduce any more. Through the mock exam in this event, which name will be the name that everyone applauds? Kim SeoJoon thought for a while. Then he wondered, if your teacher is really the person I know, then he must be a super powerhouse, right? Lee Min-yul was a bit confused, surprised by this question, and asked again immediately, how do you know? Despite the two of them talking to each other, the host still spoke, Kim SeoJoon and Lee Min-yul, and Kim SeoJoon, the result that everyone could predict, but now no one can. Unable to predict the outcome, under the noise of the world around him, Lee Min-yul still didn't pay attention, panicking and asking the male lead who he was. Kim SeoJoon smiled happily and replied, I also wanted to ask that, but it seems like we can't be gentle with each other, so I have a proposal, the loser in this match will have to pay. Answer a question from the winner, how was it? The sound of the match commentary still echoed, the final match full of anticipation, along with everyone's cheers and cheers, began. Lee Min-yul's face was serious, his eyes were cold as he responded to Kim SeoJoon's words, and people, if you lose, you have to tell the truth. Kim SeoJoon smiled and replied, why, you have to judge that yourself. The host shouted loudly, final match. Everyone in the stands was also constantly cheering and cheering. Lee Min-yul and Kim SeoJoon were holding weapons, looking intently at each other. They have not yet taken any offensive action, still standing still in place, seemingly wanting to probe the enemy. No matter how much time has passed, this situation has not changed. That made everyone sitting in the stands confused. What's wrong? Why are they both standing still and motionless? Why are they just standing there looking at each other? Kim SeoJoon's face was now extremely serious, but also a bit wary. He thought to himself, if you just look at the outside, he looks very clumsy. Lee Min-yul was no exception, staring at Kim SeoJoon with the utmost concentration, he thought, but when fighting, he completely failed to detect any of his weaknesses. The feet are gradually moving. Right after that, Lee Min-yul quickly held his weapon in his hand and approached the male protagonist, kicking and talking as he spoke, which was certainly not the right type. Kim SeoJoon's intensely focused eyes are looking at and analyzing Lee Min-yul's actions. Now Lee Min-yul is holding a sword in his hand, but considering Lee Min-yul's fighting style from the beginning until now, I think it's not simple. It's just a sword. From the beginning I have to put all my effort into finding his weak point, thinking that his hands holding the weapon suddenly clenched tighter. Kim SeoJoon quickly blocked the attack from Lee Min-yul. His weapon moved extremely flexibly, making Lee Min-yul surprised and opened his eyes wide. The next second, Lee Min-yul's sword was broken into hundreds of pieces. Kim SeoJoon took advantage of the opportunity to attack, but unfortunately Lee Min-yul somersaulted to avoid it. Immediately after that, he jumped back very far. Seeing that, the male lead immediately picked up his weapon and ran forward, thinking, well, he left his weapon behind and stepped back. If he had made a judgment any slower, it would have been a winner or loser. Already. While moving up, suddenly many arrows appeared from nowhere and rushed towards him, making him startled and confused. Not one but many arrows appeared from the sky. Lee Min-yul was using a bow and arrow to shoot them towards the main south. He quickly regained balance, his face full of seriousness. Then rotate the weapon in the palm of your hand. Thanks to that, those arrows were all dropped by his weapon, without any effect. Lee Min-yul witnessed this scene and couldn't help but smile and praise, wow, that's awesome, the weapon you used, I'm quite curious about it. The arrows that were hit by his weapon gradually fell to the ground, but Kim SeoJoon was still able to stand, not looking the slightest bit tired on his face. Lee Min-yul put down the bow and arrow in his hand, then asked, if I win, you will answer my question about that weapon, right? He attacked Lee Min-yul and happily replied, of course. Kim SeoJoon added, but that's in case he wins. Hearing him say that, Lee Min-yul smiled even more happily and replied, then I have to try harder. The sounds of collision and fighting from the two weapons continued to happen, the two of them seemed tireless, attacking non-stop. After Kim SeoJoon finished attacking, he saw something wrong and felt a little suspicious. As for Lee Min-yul, he smiled happily and enjoyed himself, holding two swords in his hands while praising him, he's really strong. While the two of them continued to fight, the male lead wondered what this strange feeling was about. His feet are still moving quickly. Kim SeoJoon attacked and blocked Lee Min-yul while looking at him thinking, in contrast to not hesitating to do illegal things to win, he didn't seem like he wanted to win at all. Indeed, looking at Lee Min-yul's face, you can see that he is very comfortable and leisurely, even whistling when fighting. Everyone outside can see that too. Keep speaking up, fight properly, Lee Min-yul, you coward. Kim SeoJoon can't help but feel confused, suspicious, and sometimes mockery comes from around him. But it seemed like he didn't mind those words at all. This was more like. Under the ring, the two people had stopped fighting. Instead they were looking intently at each other. Kim SeoJoon spoke up, don't you want to win against me? Lee Min-yul's face was filled with innocence, carefreely answering, why are you suddenly saying something random? Of course you want to win, because I have something to ask you. But. The male lead continued to ask, so why did he not have the feeling of winning at all? Hearing his words, Lee Min-yul froze, not understanding. Hey. Then he immediately replied, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm the one who wants to win you more than anyone. It's okay to lose. This statement from Lee Min-yul made Kim SeoJoon feel even more confused. Then he wondered, what, it's okay to lose, so why don't you use every means to win? Lee Min-yul calmly replied, I tried my best to win against you. It's okay to try my best. What's wrong? This made the male lead a bit uncomfortable, saying, I don't know if you are trying your best but in the eyes of others. However, before he could finish his sentence, Lee Min-yul interrupted, I'm not interested. Then he smiled comfortably, a smile as bright as the morning light, and said, no matter how others insult me, my value will not decrease. Hearing this, Kim SeoJoon suddenly froze, his whole face became bewildered. Then immediately he smiled. Then suddenly, he put the sword he was using back into his pocket, making Lee Min-yul feel confused when he saw it. After that, Kim SeoJoon took out another simpler weapon, seemingly just a very ordinary weapon. He smiled. Then speak up, now it's my turn, I hope you don't think I look down on you. What kind of world is the world that donors see? The phone shows an image of a monk accompanied by a voice. In fact, the world is not as beautiful as we think. If even the laws of nature are not strong enough, they will definitely be eliminated. So we are always training ourselves, so as not to be eliminated, so as not to fall behind compared to others, today compared to yesterday, tomorrow compared to today, we must be even stronger. Kim SeoJoon listened attentively to the Zen master's teachings. Returning to reality, he was still in the match, standing opposite Lee Min-yul. He was immersed in his own thoughts again. Hearing Lee Min-yul's words just now reminded me of Shakyamuni's teachings. The little monk wanted to ask, when did the donor ever get out of this thought? Or not, even if it was just once. Kim SeoJoon's eyes suddenly opened wide when he heard this. Appearing before his eyes was the image of Shakyamuni sitting quietly and calmly under the canopy of a large tree, illuminated by the bright sunlight. The donor had once escaped that world and looked at the world below. Different perspective or not, this is the period when the young monk is practicing from a perspective below this earth. The next stage is when Shakyamuni had the human name Gautama Siddhartha, which is the story when he had not yet joined the ranks of Buddhas and continued to practice. One day, Shakyamuni saw a group of children in a running race. They were running and laughing very happily. They didn't understand why they ran so many times. They ran and talked to each other. One more time, okay. At such times, there is always only one child who comes last. But for some reason, the smile on his face never lost. Shakyamuni was very curious, so he approached the boy and asked him, Boy, why are you running like that? Even though the boy was drenched in sweat, he still happily answered, because he liked it. Shakyamuni asked, Do you like running? The boy replied, Yes. Shakyamuni asked again, Don't you feel tired after running all the time? The boy replied, Of course, resting for a while will be fine. Stop. Just like that, what if the others catch up with you? Kim SeoJoon still remembered attentively at this time. The boy put his hands on his hips and said, My goal and other people's goals are different, how can I catch up? Hearing that, Shakyamuni pointed to the canopy of the big tree in front of him and said, So what is the destination you see over there? There are other people standing there, so I'm not sure if that is the destination or not. For me it's just a passing score. After the boy laughed, he immediately ran away. That boy kept coming in last place, and then, in the biggest running competition held in the monk's country, the monk heard that the boy had achieved extremely great results. Shakyamuni Buddha stood behind Kim SeoJoon and spoke. The little monk at that time thought it was like building a tower. Putting in every bit of effort is to build your ego, build your own life, but, when quietly listening to that boy's words, suddenly the little monk had this thought, building that tower. Actually, there's no need to complete it, it doesn't matter if it collapses. Why hasn't the little monk ever thought about it like that once? Kim SeoJoon was still standing facing Lee Min-yul. The voice of Buddha Shakyamuni kept ringing in Kim SeoJoon's ears. A long time ago, a young boy gave the young monk great enlightenment. Kim SeoJoon recalled his past, then thought, Our society is a competitive society. If you don't work hard every day, you will be eliminated. If you fall behind, you will disappear, there is no way to live. When the mosquito dies, the big fish swallows the big fish. So I have to work hard every day, thinking that if I quickly develop my appearance, I won't fall behind. But the more I became like that, the more worried I became, and I discovered that I was obsessed with the ultimate academy. I was overwhelmed by the obsession of trying hard, so as not to be eliminated, so as not to be left behind, so as not to be surpassed by anyone. To survive in this competition, the male lead just kept running. Running forever with fatigue on my face. Suddenly, there was a sound. There were other people standing there, so I wasn't sure if that was the destination. Then he thought to himself, it's okay. Even if others scolded me, my self-worth still wouldn't change. Then Kim SeoJoon remembered the boy's words, to me it's just a passing score. Lee Min-yul's image at this time was the same. With that smile, he immediately thought of the image of the boy in the story of Shakyamuni Buddha. At this moment, Kim SeoJoon's eyes seemed to awaken and brighten. Then he smiled and thought, only now do I clearly understand the words in Shakyamuni's sermon. Why have I never thought like that? As he thought, he tightened his grip on the weapon in his hand. If I use Longinus's spear, I can easily win. No matter what tricks Lee Min-yul uses, I just need to break it. My desire to win has not changed. Suddenly, he changed his fighting posture, making Lee Min-yul standing in front of him feel confused. Kim SeoJoon stood proudly with his weapon with a smile on his face, thinking, winning with the difference in equipment is also a type of ability. What? Tell me about the spear you're using, and how to get another spear. But somehow in this battle, thinking about this, the male lead immediately asked Lee Min-yul, he said that even if others curse me, it doesn't mean my value will decrease, so on the contrary, even if others praise me, that doesn't mean your self-worth will increase. He smiled and said, then thought to himself, I don't want that. Your own value will be decided by you. Lee Min-yul stood in front of him, bewildered by his words. Then he immediately asked, it seems you are better than I thought. Immediately after that, he took off his equipment. One by one, each thing fell to the ground. Lee Min-yul only held one weapon in his hand, then said, just like you, I hope you won't think I'm looking down on you. Lee Min-yul prepared himself for battle, then smiled and continued, this is the only thing I learned from my master and the thing I am most confident about. The encounter between the two created a huge amount of pressure, the ground cracked and rocks scattered everywhere. Both of them happily said in unison, I will win so you stop. Kim SeoJoon's spear both resisted the attack and kept shaking. Lee Min-yul's weapon tree is no exception. However, Lee Min-yul felt extremely happy and smiled happily. This made Kim SeoJoon startled and alert. Immediately after that, he used his weapon to swing it upward. At this moment, Lee Min-yul lowered his head to attack. Even though Lee Min-yul was getting closer to him, he still didn't feel panicked, on the contrary, he smiled. Lee Min-yul enjoyed hitting continuously with his weapon. Those attacks hit Kim SeoJoon, causing him to be injured and ooze blood. The male protagonist was defending and thinking to himself, it's too heavy, if that was Longinus's spear, each of its attacks would pose a great threat to me. Lee Min-yul was excited, happily holding his weapon forward to attack. Kim SeoJoon blocked the attack while thinking, moreover. Suddenly, Lee Min-yul's weapon transformed, changing the direction of attack. Kim SeoJoon resisted it with great difficulty, thinking to himself, it was really difficult to deal with Lee Min-yul's sudden and constantly transforming attacks. The male lead held Lee Min-yul's weapon with his bare hand, causing blood to continuously flow from his hand. Immediately after that, both of them retreated a long distance. Kim SeoJoon held the weapon firmly in his hand, smiling happily, but strangely, he felt that even if he lost, it was okay. While both of them held their weapons and ran straight up to attack the other, Kim SeoJoon was still engrossed in thoughts, even if I lose, it doesn't matter, but for the sake of winning, I will try my best. Kim SeoJoon smiled happily, so fighting is fun like this? He asked while attacking. Really, he only learned how to use weapons from his master. Lee Min-yul somersaulted to avoid his attack, coldly speaking from behind Kim SeoJoon. It was still too early to be surprised, this made the male lead feel surprised. After that, he quickly ducked his head to the ground to avoid an attack from Lee Min-yul. Their attack created a long hole in the arena field. Kim SeoJoon struggled with difficulty, sweat slowly flowing out, looking at the surroundings that were gradually changing, he thought to himself, dust. Immediately after that, he was so surprised that he had to cover his nose. Lee Min-yul was like an illusion, hidden in fine dust. In just a moment, Kim SeoJoon did not see Lee Min-yul's shadow on the stage disappear. Kim SeoJoon attentively observed the situation, wondering, how can stealth techniques, such advanced techniques, be used? The male lead turns horizontally and vertically to observe, although it is still not perfect. Suddenly, He turned his eyes to one direction, thinking, if he didn't concentrate, he would immediately disappear from his sight. After all, it seemed like Lee Minhyul wanted to determine victory or defeat with this move. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt elated. He just smiled and thought to himself, if so, it would be good because of Merlin's mana. Thinking about it, he held his weapon tightly and used mana on the spear. Through space. Suddenly, Lee Minhyul's previous battle appeared before his eyes, including the image of him using so many arrows to attack him, and the time Lee Minhyul suddenly appeared in the smoke and dust. At this point, Kim SeoJoon's eyes suddenly widened, as if he discovered something. Then he picked up his weapon and slowly moved. His face was constantly bewildered and sweating. He thought, it's okay to just do this. It's not that I lack confidence in myself, it's just that, when I saw Lee Minhyul's free fighting style, I suddenly realized that in the past time I fought too rigidly. Thinking about it, he suddenly raised his head to look, his face full of insecurity. There was a sound coming from behind that made him extremely surprised. Opening his eyes wide and learning more things was extremely wonderful. There was an old man wearing a costume that covered his whole body and wearing a long hat like a wizard. He said, but studying will form habits and that habit will become an obstacle to self-expression, because learning is absorbing what others show. Learning gives yourself the illusion that you are doing very well but in fact you are just imitating others. Those words made Kim SeoJoon suddenly wake up, his face full of bewilderment. He had to remember, he was not allowed to feel satisfied with just studying. With those advice, Kim SeoJoon closed his eyes tightly, pondering, no. It's not Merlin's mana, it's my mana. Thinking about it, he immediately poured mana into the spear. That sound kept echoing in his head. He was not allowed to feel satisfied with just studying, he had to use his own way. Learning had to exist as a trick to express yourself. Kim SeoJoon closed his eyes to concentrate, using his own strength to perform. The sound continued to echo. One more thing, Merlin's knowledge, Chiron's feeling, Hang's immense power. Vu, the unmoving mind of Shakyamuni. The dazzling yellow power stream was continuously accumulating. Not all of that. Suddenly, as if thinking about the problem, Kim SeoJoon opened his serious eyes wide. But it must be your own thing. Thinking about it, he immediately held the weapon in his hand and used his own power. A huge stream of energy flashed on the spear he held in his hand. Immediately after that, Kim SeoJoon pointed his spear at the ground. A huge stream of power radiated out. Everyone in the stands was also affected a lot. They couldn't help but cry out in surprise, oh, that's so sad. Everyone's eyes widened and their mouths opened, staring intently, exclaiming, no, that's impossible. Hunters have to undergo decades of training to reach that level, but how can a student can do so? Kim SeoJoon held the glowing spear in his hand, his face full of seriousness, not showing any emotion. Immediately after that power spread, affecting all around the field. Suddenly, his glowing eyes turned sharply to look in one direction. That spear rushed straight towards Lee Minhyul, who was planning to attack him under his sudden appearance. Kim SeoJoon firmly held his spear, pointing it straight at Lee Minhyul's body. Both of them were facing each other, fighting extremely fiercely. The smoke and dust around the arena was emitting more and more. Immediately after that, Kim SeoJoon looked at Lee Minhyul and smiled. His spear was pointed right at Lee Minhyul's neck, causing him to break out in a cold sweat. The weapon he held in his hand gradually broke, accompanied by the words, "I lost." At this time, the atmosphere in the arena was filled with everyone's cheers. The overall winner was Kim SeoJoon. Kalia held the cup of tea and looked coldly. She nonchalantly raised the cup to her mouth to drink, lowered her eyes, and simply replied, "Is that so?" After finishing drinking, he put down the cup and asked the guy in black again, "Is it a bad thing?" The guy in black was scared, hesitated for a moment, then hummed and said, "That's it. It looked like it was a failure, but I didn't know if I should call it a failure or not." Kalia looked at him. What did he mean by that? He said, Kim SeoJoon suddenly changed the way he used weapons, and while deciding he used Aura Blade but. Hearing this, she somewhat realized the current situation. Her face immediately darkened. She thought, this was unexpected. Then she pushed the chair up and stood up. "I know, for now, just keep an eye on him. I will report this to the apostles." The guy in the black shirt was silent for a moment and then asked, "Is there a reason why we have to go to such an extent?" After hearing this sentence, she suddenly paused. She turned her head to look at him. "What do you say?" He seemed quite enthusiastic and said, "I know Kim SeoJoon is a character we should keep an eye on. But the Korean Association has begun a comprehensive investigation into the appearance of this 10-star dungeon. Because of this, the plans we've been preparing for the past 10 years have been interrupted. I honestly don't understand why we did all of this just for that kid. Kalia couldn't hear anymore, so she interrupted. She said, "What did the Apostle of Chastity say, Calchas?" The man in black opened his mouth to speak but stopped looking at her face. He was so scared that he was sweating profusely, his mouth was tight and he couldn't utter another word. After seeing her still silent and not making any movement, the atmosphere was extremely tense, so the man in black bowed and ran quickly, not forgetting to say, "I'm sorry." In the room, there was only Kalia. She stood with her arms crossed and said nothing, her eyes glanced away, her eyebrows furrowed, worried about what would happen next. Kalia remembered the memory just now. She knelt down and bowed to the guy in black who was walking back and forth. That guy said as he walked, "Kalia, I heard about the magic chaos in Korea this time. It's true." "Why?" Kalia honestly declared, "Yes, it was true." The man in black asked again, "I also heard that it had been resolved. Who was the one who resolved the magical chaos this time?" Kalia still bowed respectfully and replied, "That person was Kim SeoJoon." How strange, she thought to herself, he obviously knew everything but still called me to ask about this again. His glowing red eyes kept staring at her as if he wanted to devour her. She continued thinking, but why did he ask who solved this problem and how? He approached her, lowered his head to look at her, making her feel extremely breathless and suffocated. He said, "Pay attention to the actions of that Kim SeoJoon." Kalia was sweating profusely and shyly asked, "Can I ask the reason?" But he used his remaining red eye to look at her, then jumped up and grabbed her by the neck. Behind that look, there seemed to be an invisible pressure that made her scared and immediately lowered her head. He said to Kalia in a voice filled with murderous intent, "Kalia, I understand that the person who knows your position will become the heir of one of the 7 apostles," and Kalia was forced by him using a strange power. "Bow down further." He continued, "But sometimes you forget your place." Kalia knelt on the ground, almost crawling, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry." At that moment, something rang out that caught her attention. That was the sound of his footsteps. He walked straight forward, and said again, "That is not your support." Kalia opened her eyes wide, seemingly wanting to say something. She sat up straight, turned towards him, her voice still shaking. She stammered out those words. However, he did not dare to finish his sentence, thinking in his heart that it was not just the Apostle Keat Tin who held the most important position among the apostles of the Church of Truth. Kalia sat on the ground, her face ashen, looking at his back, her mouth unable to close. As long as she was one of the 7 apostles, no matter what position anyone had, they would not dare to touch them casually. The guy in black still keeps moving forward without turning back. "In the past time, you have always handled everything yourself without the consent of the elders. Considering your position as heir, you can ignore all of that, but please report to me everything related to Kim SeoJoon. Use the apostle in moderation as a messenger to convey the supreme command." Returning to reality, Kalia stood in the room, her eyebrows could not help but frown, she bit her nails until they were shaking, extremely uncomfortable. There are not many people in this world who can do that. Kalia unconsciously cut off her fingernails, splattering them everywhere. Because she bit too hard, a wound appeared on the tip of her index finger, but she still didn't realize it and kept thinking, "No, actually there was only one person. There is only that taste." Scene changed to another place. There are a lot of people here, extremely noisy and bustling. "It's crazy. Even if I die today I won't feel sorry. I was planning to go to Asari's house to pray, but I didn't expect Kim SeoJoon is so strong. How long until the professional hunter's exam? Let's contact them." Park Seo-eun curled her mouth, hands on her hips, looking extremely sad. She said, "What should I do? Because of his mood, I see him more and more like a monster." Kim SeoJoon stood against the wall, crossed his arms and said, "What the hell, you're talking too much, Seo-eun." Park Seo-eun was angry. "It's not like that, anyone looking at it would think so, especially when you use it. Aura blade. But where did you learn that aura blade from?" After hearing this sentence, Kim SeoJoon felt guilty. He stood up straight, scratched his head. It was just a fluke. This sentence made Park Seo-eun even more angry. There was smoke coming out of her head. She scolded, "Come again, come again." Park Seo-eun sighed deeply. "Phew, then today is over, let's go home." Kim SeoJoon looked at her. "Yes, but before that I need to meet someone." "Did you meet someone?" As soon as she finished asking, a guy wearing a blue shirt came running from behind. His body was full of weapons, bows, arrows, spears, guns, anything he bought at Shop A. "Running with all my life, running and saying, 'Ah, let's see, I told you I don't like it. We promise to give you the best conditions, of course scholarships. Our academy is an academy with the best instructors and facilities. If you continue to study on your own like that, it will be very difficult. You have to work hard to prepare for the professional hunter exam. Don't be like that. Why don't you come visit our academy and try it out?'" Park Seo-eun pointed at them, wondering if that was the person he wanted to meet. Kim SeoJoon was curious and leaned over to see what was going on. He replied, "Yes, that's true, but the guys on this side were still screaming loudly. The guy in the blue shirt refused to give up, so he turned around and scolded the fat guy and the buffalo guy. No matter how much money or incentives he gave me, I still wouldn't go to the academy." "Where?" Kim SeoJoon looked at them and thought. Sure enough, everyone was clinging to him, and Park Seo-eun's face was gray. His emotions were mixed. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Kim SeoJoon continued to think, even though he was in the finals. He lost at my hands, but just the fact that he was self-taught and did not belong to any academy but achieved such a level is enough to attract attention. From the standpoint of the academies, everyone really wants to have him. To have him, such a talent cannot be missed. Just like what Kim SeoJoon said, these fat guys looked at the guy in the blue shirt with such longing that their mouths watered. Each of them had postcards in their hands. They were smiling lewdly, kihihi, hungry for talent. The fat guy with a long tongue licks his lips. Just seeing talented people makes his mouth water, while the other guy tries to be friendly. He must come to our academy, making the blue shirt guy's face darken. Tears flowed. Kim SeoJoon thought, no, if those people keep following him like that, what should I do? I should have known it would turn out like this. From the beginning I should have met him in a more private place. The guy in the blue shirt occasionally turned his head to look at SeoJoon and was about to say something but was interrupted by the other guys. He shouted, "No, I told you I don't like it." After saying that, the guy in the blue shirt suddenly literally disappeared. The guys in the vests gasped. Dozens of question marks appeared above their heads. It turned out that he used magic to teleport behind SeoJoon to hide from those people. His face was extremely tense. He grabbed SeoJoon's shoulder and shouted loudly, "I'm going to the Dream Academy." Okay. After saying this sentence, 4 pairs of eyes stared at him at the same time, their faces clearly showing what 2 letters were. The guy in the blue shirt shouted again, "Anyway, let's just make that decision." "What? Let's run quickly." Park Seo-eun's face can't relax. "You sneeze." Kim SeoJoon, "No, this. Where are we going? Damn it, I missed it." The 3 people, Park Seo-eun, Kim SeoJoon and the guy in the blue shirt, ran away from the others, panting. After running for a while, I was so tired that I stopped. Seo-eun looked back. We must have escaped, and the other 2 people were holding their hands on their hips, out of breath while the blue shirt guy scratched his head and smiled wryly. Kim SeoJoon gritted his teeth and scolded him. "What were you thinking when you said that?" The blue shirt guy quickly waved his hand to explain, "Because they kept clinging to me. At that time, I didn't know what to do, and it wasn't like I didn't have anything. What do you think about this?" Kim SeoJoon calmed down a bit. He turned to look at him and said, "It's not like you don't want to join the Hunter Academies. I'm just thinking about whether I should study at the same academy as you." He looked at him with a bewildered face. All he could do was open his mouth and say a few words. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know how to react." He said he was going to the academy, but I couldn't object, because after all, I'm just a student of the Dream Academy. If I'm determined. If I object, Miss Seo-eun probably won't accept him into the academy, but I don't want to interfere with Miss Seo-eun's affairs. Kim SeoJoon said, "We'll talk about it later." He seriously looked at the blue shirt. "Do you still remember our promise?" The blue shirt raised his mouth slightly and replied, "Of course. Now we have to solve the problem that needs to be solved first." Kim SeoJoon continued, "The teacher he talked about, who exactly is that person?" The guy in the blue shirt closed his eyes, his eyebrows slightly frowned, and said nothing. Then he suddenly opened his eyes wide, his face showing determination. He exclaimed boldly, "I don't know," very confident, refreshingly handsome. While he was still smiling, Kim SeoJoon's face looked like if he said one more sentence he would attack mercilessly. Kim SeoJoon was filled with murderous intent, clenched his fists and walked step by step towards him. He said some scary words as he walked. "Are you kidding me now? Otherwise this means you are lying." Seeing that the situation was not good, the guy in the blue shirt quickly waved his hand, repeatedly saying, "Wait." Kim SeoJoon continued, "Okay, I will force you to tell the truth." The guy in the blue shirt is also scared to death right now. He shouted. "Up. No, it's not like that. I really don't know. Believe me, I'm telling the truth. He doesn't know I'm his student either." Kim SeoJoon still didn't believe it. He said suspiciously, "Just now when you used the dagger you said you were taught it." The blue shirt guy was speechless. Before he could explain, Kim SeoJoon pointed at him and continued, "Moreover, he also said that his teacher was a transcendent level powerhouse, but he didn't know." "Who is your teacher?" "No, because." Kim SeoJoon and Park Seo-eun stared at his face waiting for an answer. The blue shirt guy continued, "The teacher didn't teach me anything. It was all because I overheard it. I have never been taught by anyone. Students study on their own. It is very common for a person to have no money or talent but wants to become a hunter, but Minhyul's case is different. He has both talent and no shortage of money. But he didn't want to be tied to any academy, so he chose to study on his own. The guy in the blue shirt said, "I trained alone deep in the mountains. Even though there was no one to guide me, I felt quite satisfied because I didn't have to follow the stuffy curriculum of any academy, so I kept going. One day, while I was exercising as usual, I suddenly felt like someone was there. During one hunt, he did notice something. He ran out from under the tree to look and saw a silver-haired man lying there. Minhyul quickly ran over, shook the other person, calling, 'Hey, are you okay?' That was the first meeting between the teacher and I. Minhyul ran over and shook the old man while calling out, 'Hey, are you okay?' Then he looked at his hand and saw it was covered in blood because he had just touched him. There was no other way. Minhyul helped the black saint onto his back. The wound was too serious. If you just leave him like this, but you didn't forget to reassure him, 'Wait a minute, I will take you to the hospital right away.' The gray-haired man trembled, stammered and said, 'No, if I go down the mountain, I won't be able to.' Minhyul lost all composure and asked again, 'What do you mean? You have to go to the hospital immediately, otherwise he will die.' Black Saint was weak and had no strength left. He leaned his head on his shoulder and tried to squeeze out a few words. 'I couldn't.' The old man continued, 'If he went down the mountain, Minhyul would carry the Black Saint on his back without leaving,' he thought. 'I could feel the urgency in every word he said, so I had to give up the idea of taking him. When I got to the hospital, I had no other choice. I had to take care of that man in an abandoned house in the mountains.' Minhyul went into the abandoned house and sat down, picked up the bowl, and took a spoonful. 'Feed the Black Saint who is lying on the floor.' At first, his condition was so serious that it was a miracle that he did not die immediately, but as time passed, I felt that the man was recovering quickly. After a while, Minhyul was still in the forest. Every day he carried a briefcase on his back, thinking to himself as he walked, 'It's been a month since I took care of that old man. What if he woke up today? Again, it's so good.' Suddenly a voice rang out, 'We thought you were going to die, but it seems you not only survived but are also hiding here.' He heard these words, he stopped in doubt. Minhyul quickly hid behind the tree trunk, observing the group of black-clad armored men. The old man he had saved stood with his back turned to them and said, 'I didn't expect you to come all the way here for an old man about to die. It seems when you get old, you have too much free time.' Minhyul still didn't understand what was going on. Thoughts continuously appeared in his head. That old man, did he just wake up today? Several people wearing armor raised their swords and surrounded the Black Saint, asking, 'Did someone help you, old man? You don't need to know.' They still haven't discovered him hiding behind the tree. He stood still. There he didn't dare move. His face was extremely tense. More importantly, what was the situation? A guy wearing a black shirt with green hair grinned, revealing his fangs. He said, 'I don't need to know. It's probably not the kid hiding over there. I didn't expect this green guy to have noticed his presence. He's truly formidable.' Minhyul, standing behind the tree, was also a bit frightened by what he just said. The Black Saint on this side suddenly swung his hand towards the other man's neck, causing his head to fly high in the air while his chin was about to fall to the ground. Then, one by one, each of them was destroyed. The old man's actions were aimed at their necks, so whichever one he cut, he would die. He and they were not on the same level, so in less than a second they were overtaken by him. The old man did not expect to have such extraordinary speed. The guys who had not been beheaded turned around to look, Cuke. But they still did not give up, called their accomplices, killed him, then took up their weapons and rushed from all directions to attack the Black Saint. Minhyul thought back and still couldn't help but tremble. He tried to look calm and continued, 'It's the first time I've seen someone fight so well since I was born.' He continued to say that the guy who seemed to be the leader was lucky that his head was not chopped off, but only his face was cut off. He gritted his teeth and looked at the Black Saint. 'This was not part of our plan.' He and the Black Saint stood facing each other among the corpses strewn on the ground. Behind the old man, there was Minhyul sitting on the ground. The Black Saint suddenly said, 'I guess you guys forgot that you couldn't see me.' Then he glanced back at Minhyul who was just about to kick. He shouted, 'Leave here now, and never come back.' After saying this sentence, the Black Saint rushed forward to hit that boy. His purple smoke flew back, causing Minhyul to cover her eyes. When he opened his eyes, Mr. Black Saint finished killing all those people and ran away. Minhyul was still sitting on the ground bewildered. He had disappeared. After that, he went back to the abandoned house and took his things. I had absolutely no idea what happened, but my instincts told me to listen to the old man's words, so before leaving I prepared myself. Your belongings. While packing, he discovered a book on the ground. He realized that there was a manuscript here that the old man seemed to have forgotten in his haste, so I was quite frightened. Minhyul lowered his eyes. I intended to return it to him if I had a chance to meet him again, but since then I have never seen him. Kim SeoJoon has been listening attentively to him with a complicated expression. And Park Seo-yoon was rubbing her chin thinking about something. Kim SeoJoon crossed his arms and said, "Wait, you mean that old man used to be your master? But, how can you call someone who has never taught you anything a master?" Minhyul answered honestly, Actually, when I looked at the manuscript, I realized that those were his most precious notes, the most precious." Lee Minhyul scratched his head, blushing shyly. It included dagger techniques and invisibility techniques, but in the end I read it. I also knew it was wrong to look at other people's things, but I lost it. Kim SeoJoon frowned. "No way, so you mean he doesn't even know he's his disciple?" Lee Minhyul rubbed his two fingers together, sweating all over. From his way of fighting, he was definitely a monk. Master is the one who created the precious moves written in the manuscript, but because Master still doesn't know that I'm keeping that precious record, or that I've learned his moves, Kim SeoJoon keep quiet and say nothing more. Suddenly Minhyul screamed again, stuttering, looking very awkward. "I know this is hard to believe, but it's all true." Kim SeoJoon looked at Minhyul with a thoughtful expression. "Well, I know the possibility of him lying is very high, but he is not an ordinary cadet of the Ultimate Academy." Lee Minhyul reluctantly pointed his finger to the sky, closed his eyes and closed his nose, swearing, "Really, I swear to God, Kim SeoJoon still hasn't stopped doubting him?" he asked. "Do you really not know who he is?" Lee Minhyul racked his brain and said dejectedly, "I really don't know. Actually, the reason I took the mock exam was because I thought that if it was a large-scale competition like this, the master might find me." Park Seo-yoon had been silent all this time, but suddenly she seemed to think of something and then hummed and said, "Well, I just thought of this after hearing you say it, but do you think that the person you call master is actually the Black Saint?" "Cause no." After hearing what she said, both Kim SeoJoon and Lee Minhyul looked at her with Minhyul's expression still very innocent, but Kim SeoJoon heard what she said and suddenly realized it. He thought to himself, "Black Saint. The Black Saint, just like the Sword Saint, he is one of the 5 iconic heroes of Korea. Among the 5, he is the most mysterious. It is said that he is a rare assassination genius, and the reason no one knew anything about him other than his name was because he always lived in seclusion. But if that was what the Sword Saint's niece, Lady Seo-yoon, said, then it was a different story." Kim SeoJoon looked at Miss Seo-yoon and asked, "Miss Seo-yoon, have you ever met the Black Saint?" Park Seo-yoon had no intention of hiding it from the two of you. She said, "What? Yes, I met him a few times. When I was young, he sometimes visited my grandfather, but they always argued." Kim SeoJoon continued asking, "Then Miss Seo-yoon, can you ask the Sword Saint about the precious note in Minhyul's hand? I think if it's from the Black Saint, well, maybe so. If it's grandfather, you will know if the record belongs to the Black Saint. I can ask you, but do you agree?" Listening to the two people talking, Lee Minhyul's face just looked stupid and confused, not understanding anything. It's true that the more I listen, the more stupid I get. Minhyul's face is like a cow wearing a hat, he asked. My grandfather with a face that couldn't be more innocent. The next day at Dream Hunter. It's just dawn, but for some reason, Kim SeoJoon's face is gray, frowning, and he's pouting in disgust. The cell phone appeared with the copied text. Gungnir means Odin's spear, $500,000. Kim SeoJoon looked at the phone screen dissatisfiedly and complained, how could just one piece of equipment cost $500,000? He held the phone, grimaced in discomfort, swearing out a few vague sentences. How does this academy operate that no matter how much money I make, I still can't pay the expenses? Ahoo, anyway it's okay, I don't need support weapons very urgently. The $1 million bonus for placing first in the practice test has been transferred smoothly. The bonus for the event match will probably take more time, and goes to Lee Minhyul. What, is this beautiful sister the Sword Saint's niece? Those were Lee Minhyul's words of surprise and bewilderment. His face was distorted and his chin was about to fall to the ground. He bowed with all his life, bent up and down. "So, please help me find my master." Park Seo-yoon saw that and quickly waved his hand. "Yes, I will try to ask my grandfather." At first, he was worried about giving that precious record to someone else. However, he was fine with showing off what he had learned, so he decided to return to the academy today to meet the Sword Saint together. Remembering the image of Lee Minhyul giving a thumbs up and asking Kim SeoJoon to meet him tomorrow made him think, wait a minute, why is Lee Minhyul talking so politely to Miss Seo-yoon? He has already abandoned all manners.